Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us on the webinar today about this very, very important topic that is gaining more and more momentum. I don't know if it's for good or bad, but it's on the headlines nowadays. So thank you all for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Daniel Ibri. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of Mindset Ventures. Mindset Ventures, I think most of you know, we are an early stage VC firm born in Brazil, but now with operations in Brazil, the US, and Israel. We invest only in North America and Israeli companies and help them grow, expand, hire, increase sales, and especially come down to the Brazilian market or to Latin American markets. We're very hands-on on that. We have a bunch of our startups already working here in Brazil, which is very interesting. And we just finished raising our third fund now in March, so very happy with that. The portfolio has reached more than 50 companies already, and all of them on the B2B SaaS sector. And since the beginning of Mindset in 2016, we've been focusing a lot in cyber. We always believe that cyber is a very, very important area for big companies, enterprises, and now getting to the mid-size and small companies as well. So we've been doing a lot of investments in cyber. One of the most recent ones was Eclypsium, an amazing company. Yuriy, the founder, is here with us, so he's going to share a little bit about the company. So we're very excited about cyber, about the potential opportunities, about everything that's happening in the market. So I'll be glad if you share a little bit about our excitement at the end of this webinar. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the word first to Yuriy.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great to be here, and it's great to speak with my fellow panelists. Thanks everyone for joining. My name is Yuriy Bulygin. I'm CEO and co-founder of Eclypsium. We are a company headquartered in the United States that has been on the market for 4 years. And prior to that, my personal background, I've been with security for almost 20 years now, and primarily on the vulnerability research exploitation side. Let me say I've had enough of experience with writing exploits and finding vulnerabilities in my prior life before starting Eclypsium. I've been part of the product security assurance at Intel Corporation, as well as a chief security researcher of Intel Security. Eclypsium is addressing the problem of evolving risk from all of the firmware developed by manufacturers that they put into all of those devices and pieces of equipment that we purchase, that we use, that we operate. And all of those devices, including the networking appliances and storage appliances and VPNs and servers and laptops and even IoT. So we're helping our clients address that risk.
Thank you, Yuriy. João, please.
Hello, I'm João Brasio, and I am co-founder and CEO of Elytron Security. Basically, we work helping our customers to find vulnerabilities in their systems, infrastructure, devices, etc., and how they can mitigate them to avoid cyber attacks in the future. We have multiple services and solutions to help our clients to increase their cyber defense. I am working with information security for more than a decade. That is everything I do. I wake up breathing information security is something that I love. So I work at hacking systems to help companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, to help them fix these bugs. And I already found a lot of vulnerabilities in systems used worldwide. And I have a few CVEs because of that job. So basically my job in the last decade was to help companies, clients, people to become safer in the cyber field.
Thank you, João. Eduardo, please.
So thanks, Mindset Ventures and Daniel, for the invite. I'm Eduardo Kimura. I am Executive Director of Voiter Bank. I'm responsible for technology and digital transformation. Voiter Bank is a new Brazilian business bank. We are in the middle between investors from one side and companies and entrepreneurs from the other side. We are reinventing corporate banking, wearing our client shoes, with deep financial knowledge, financial system knowledge, in order to provide creative and assertive solutions for the companies in credit and financial services, including cash management and exploring technology and capital markets. Right? So we are 1 year old now as a result of a complete turnaround and rebranding of a full stack organizational product and technology stack turnaround from the former Indusval Bank under a complete rebuilt client-centric value proposition. And we are based on talented people and a strong culture with levity and a straightforward long-term relationship with our clients.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. So I'm going to start with a general question for all of you, and I know you have different perspectives on that. So we are seeing a lot of new cyber threats arising, right? So we were talking about malware for the past 20 years, and then phishing, and now it's the ransomware. And we just saw JBS, which is a big Brazilian company, one of the biggest meat producers in the world, just paid like $11 million in Bitcoin to get release of a ransomware. So we're seeing this really evolving quicker. So, and we see all the specialists say that if you want to win this war, you need to be one step ahead. You really need to anticipate what's going to happen, right? So my question to you all is, what you are doing in your activities like Eclypsium, Elytron, Voiter, what you're doing to be one step ahead at this time?
Thank you, Daniel. Great question. There's unfortunately kind of a misaligned speed on the attacker side and the defender side, because on the defender side, we still in this mindset of, especially in the large organizations where we invest in the cyber projects that are going to be long-term, that will protect our entire infrastructure from adversaries, and that takes time. And that takes months to adopt technologies, to deploy them, implement them, and to tune them so that they actually start working. In the meantime, adversaries are they are adopting much faster, and they're more flexible, and they have become more organized. But they change their tactics, techniques more often. And when they see that their targets are, and they watch the targets, they see where they invest in, especially for a long time with a lot of new security controls, they move to other places. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of recent hacks. The ransomware, the VPNs have been around for a while, but no one patched them because 1% of employees have been using VPNs. Now VPNs and the vulnerabilities in the firmware of those VPNs have become one of the top 2 targets for ransomware folks, because we moved to work remotely. And no one is monitoring those VPNs. No one was patching those VPNs or any other appliances. It can be any other appliance for that, say gateways and load balancers and so on. So they moved to that. I think it's just important for us to recognize that we as defenders need to be more flexible and assess attack surface and the new risk more frequently, and maybe invest in technologies that faster in new technologies that address those kind of changing gaps.
You need to know the threats of the present and the threats of the past. Stay informed, because these can give us more time and ability to think and anticipate threats that may arise in the future. So we need to study, we need to stay informed, we need to understand the modus operandi of the attackers. Always assume that someone is planning the attack to attack you today, not tomorrow, and turn the fear that will arise from thinking about it into proactive actions. You need to start doing something now. You need to start protect your company and even your devices, your information today. Protect yourself and your company by thinking in the worst case scenario. Don't be optimist when it comes to cybersecurity. Unfortunately, we cannot be optimist in this matter. The threats are getting more complex each day, and they are spreading faster than ever. So we really need to anticipate something, and we need to invest in solutions and services that can help us to protect.
How about you, Eduardo? What you and Voiter are doing to be one step ahead?
Well, firstly, one thing that it's pretty clear here is it is not an IT problem, right? It is a corporate responsibility. So I followed cybersecurity with them in the last decades, and I see that there are lots of postponing investments in multiple ways. So, in certain level, the attacks are boosting our operating models in multiple industry sectors and companies. So, it is not a security job, a server job, a workplace job, or a risk management job. It is a corporate responsibility. So, the first thing is a mobilization of the entire company for the prioritization of the right investments on that. Secondly, I think it's not personal or business. With the COVID-19 pandemics, the things are getting more complicated with working from home. We have a lot of complexities between the BioD devices and the corporate devices. So we're firstly establishing a very strong cyber strategy in order to tackle things that are very specific to Voiter Bank, right? So there are no miracle plug and play solution. Every company should be responsible for establishing its own strategy, cybersecurity strategy, and the segmentation strategy as well. It is not the cloud provider job to do the segmentation; it is the company segmentation. And also we are doing a strong value and risk analysis inherent to our business lines of business, and we do pen tests and a very deep risk assessment audits in the entire environment. And finally, on the people side, I think it's very strong, dependent upon training and education and the policies modernization, because we cannot afford keeping privilege management outdated policies in the environment, which is for sure, it's one of the sources of the vulnerabilities that the companies have. So overall, that's it: modernizing policies, risk assessment, and establishing a strong cybersecurity strategy.
Thank you, Eduardo. So another point that I want to start with João here. João, when you go to a new client these days, right? What is normally the first or the main issue or vulnerability that you identify on these companies nowadays? You handle lots of big corporations, especially Brazilian ones. What's the main vulnerability that you find on these customers nowadays?
There is many vulnerabilities that are common, like the lack of the most basic security solutions, such as firewall, web application firewall, antivirus. So we are talking about the lack of the most basic security solutions. We see this a lot, but one of the biggest problems are outdated software, libraries, plugins with non-vulnerabilities. So a lot of companies are using softwares that everybody around the world knows some type of exploit. The software has a CVE, a common vulnerability entry, and the companies still use it. Do not patch, do not update. This is a huge problem. I can say that more than half of the biggest cyber attacks we are seeing are because of some type of outdated software with a non-vulnerability. But I can say a little bit more, like low-trained employees in social engineering attacks and other types of attacks. So you need to invest in education. We don't see this a lot. I can say that 9% of companies are not investing right in the education of their collaborators. And web applications full of sensitive data and full of vulnerabilities. And basic vulnerabilities like SQL injection, RCE, because the companies are not performing recurring penetration tests. You need to test your security every time, every month. It's not something that you do just one day and you can keep years without assessing your systems again.
Great. How about you, Yuriy? When you take Eclypsium to a new client, what's the major vulnerability or issue that you find? And especially your specialty at Eclypsium on the firmware level, How does that play a component in the threats?
I have to agree here with João, because the first thing we notice is about 76% of devices. And how old do you think this software, the old software, is? You know, the 2 weeks old software, it's already old. Maybe a month, that's already old. 76% of all of our devices that we monitor, they have 3 to 5 years old firmware. They never updated firmware since they purchased the device, and that it doesn't matter what that device is. Could be a server with remote, you know, IPMI Redfish access to remotely control the server farm. Could be a laptop, you know, from manufacturers of your choice with a 3-year-old UEFI firmware that is exploited by trick bot operators. Or it could be a VPN appliance or a gateway switch or a switch that is sitting externally that has, you know, CVSS10 vulnerabilities. This is the biggest problem, and it's a problem in software, absolutely, but it's 10x problem in firmware, because there are no converged mechanisms or automated mechanisms that can patch those devices by those hundreds of manufacturers. There's just none of them exist. There's no Windows update for these, and that becomes a significant problem, because not only you have 1 or 2 vulnerabilities, but you have all of the vulnerabilities that have been found in the firmware over the last 3 years. And that's why we're seeing most of the actors today, they do use some of the new vulnerabilities, especially the nation states. But most of them, they actually use 2018, 2019 RCEs, and that's because there are plenty of organizations that still have those appliances with those RCEs, because they're not patched. I think that's one of the biggest things that we always notice. Now, I don't want to go into specific of the vulnerabilities. It's just there's so many of them. Our statistics is 99% of the devices, they do have more than multiple of critical firmware vulnerabilities. But that's not surprising given where we are with patching.
Very cool. And Eduardo, on your segment, let's say banking, right? One of the main targets of attacks. So what you feel is the main threat or the main vulnerabilities for the financial sector overall? Where do you see the major gaps?
It's special for our business model. We are in a growing, we are going in a platform business, right? So we are exploring the flourishing ecosystems. We do have in the industry sector, open banking is coming, right? So we do care about our clients as we do with ourselves. This is at the core of our value proposition. So the major concern is how to protect our clients as we protect ourselves in the entire journey, right? For our financial services, from our servers to the endpoints and the consumption by our clients. So we do have, as many other sectors, we are not free of phishing, continuous phishing tentatives. And it's important to know that when phishing, firewalls will not gonna matter, right, for the things that it needs, because if you get phished, so phishing is one thing that it's pretty common. It's cross sector, social engineering as well, and we have also sophisticated attacks. We are aware about the globalization of the attacks. So that's something that is a real threat. There is a professionalism in large scale multi geography attacks. So we do have news from simultaneous attacks in multiple banks in different geographies. This is pretty common. So it's pretty cheap to attack and very expensive to protect, right? So, and one thing that I think that I believe it is something that is very common in the sector in large, middle, and small banks. It's how to patch systems that you don't own, right? So how to rethink working with legacy systems from software providers that don't have their shelf life expectancy, right? So this is a real issue that banks need to address. in order to patch legacy outdated systems that are still in place. I think these are overall a high-level summary of what I believe are happening overall in banks of all sizes and cross-sector.
Because of the attacks are becoming more complex, the hackers are becoming more educated. So who is actually winning this war nowadays? We're seeing lots of infrastructure attacks, which makes us concerned. We're seeing lots of infrastructure targeting the US. So who's winning this war in your perspective, right? How is this war shaping along between bad side and good side, companies and hackers and etc.? So,
I'd probably look at who's winning the war of criminals or law enforcement. I don't think anyone is winning. We all have our losses and wins, and same with cyber war. What's alarming is that a lot of convergence that is going on between criminal actors and the nation state sponsored actors. And when that happens, and when they start targeting private sector organizations, what we're seeing now, in that case, the organizations cannot keep up with that because the resources of those adversaries merged. They become more organized. We now see criminal enterprises are more inventive than a lot of our defenders in terms of not only technologies and techniques that they use, but in terms of how they organize the process. Hitting the upstream and then using that as a point of influencing that vendor or a compromised victim to pay ransom because of the pressure in their to their supply to the organizations they supply to. With JBS is a good example. Or providing ransomware as a service, providing access to the botnet to multiple actors, and so on. So they're becoming a lot more organized in that respect. And what's encouraging is to see that the government needs to help those private sector organizations to defend themselves against those type of actors. I'm sure we'll get to the point that we will be a lot more effective in fending off just regular criminal gangs, but help from the government, what we're seeing in the United States, for example, to defend against those type of converged actors is important. Otherwise, we're going to be losing to them long term.
Interesting. Eduardo, João, do you have comments?
Yes, I can take that. I think, well, in my opinion, I think it is an always-on battle. There's not a winner or loser from each side. This is the new normal, so we need to be aware of this continuous evolution of the sophistication of the attacks from one side. In the other side, I believe that there is a missing coalition for counterattacking that. This is something that I'm observing in the market. So hackers are collaborating each other even more in the dark web, in the dark net. But the companies, the governments, and the solution providers are not in the same level that we see in the criminal side. So I believe there are opportunities for improvement on that side. If you consider statistics only, you may conclude that the hackers are winning, right? Because there are some statistics saying that in 2020 they earned about 15 or 20 billion dollars in ransoms, right? So it is a lot of money. It's a winning money. But if you consider the attracted attention that they brought, right, and the global mobilization, including governments, I think there's a growing maturity on the bright side of the force, right, involving governments, companies, and industry sectors and cyber tech companies. So I believe that there are multiple advances, identity analytics and stopping new account fraud, and a lot of things that are possible to see in the market because of this evolution of the attacks and the counterattacks. So if you consider the real boost in technology and operating model maturity provoked by such attacks, we need to thank hackers for lighting the fire of the modernization, right? Because there's a lot of modernization streams that are unlocked in the recent years in those high performance companies with more awareness about what's need to be done, right? So companies have been postponing investments for a long time and treating cyber risk as complementary activities, and now it is at the center of the stage, and it is provoking a lot of positive side effects on the operating model in the entire technology stack, not only because of the cybersecurity prevention, but also on the rest of the architecture. Right?
I agree with Eduardo. I believe that there are many solutions and defenses that could have prevented some of the biggest recent attacks that we are seeing in the news. But again, we emphasize the problem is the lack of companies going after these such solutions, often because the cost and because a lot of them believe that they will not be attacked because there are a lot of similar companies like me. There are thousands, tens of thousands of companies. Why I will be the target? Sorry, you will be the target. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you are going to be a target. So, in my opinion, we have to change this reality as quick as possible. We need to invest more. We need to stop postponing these investments, or we will live in a world without privacy. When you see some huge leak in the news, we are already seeing these people saying, again, my password was leaked. No problem. It was leaked 10 times in this month. So people are becoming cold. It's becoming normal. And it should not be normal, this type of situation. So we need to change this as soon as possible.
I have a lot of interesting questions here from the audience. I'm going to start with the first one from Eder, and I'm going to open this to the three of you to comment. So Eder is asking that he's seen lots of companies that are redirecting the cyber investments from protection or avoiding the attacks to actually focusing on recovering as soon as possible, right? So I'm not going to prevent for being attacked because I'm going to be attacked anyway. So I'm going to just redirect my investment to just get it recovered or get it back on track as soon as possible after the attack. So what are your perspectives on this? Both João, Eduardo, Yuriy, have you seen lots of companies taking this approach, or some companies or most companies are still concerned about protection and avoiding the attacks themselves?
Yeah, we are seeing this type of approach. Is super true and is scary because we don't believe in this model. Of course, you need to invest in prevention, and I'm not saying that you cannot invest in some type of recovery. You need to invest in both sides because yes, you can be some attacked with a lot of solutions, with a lot of defenses. You can end being attacked. So please invest in recovery, invest in backup, invest in incident response, but please do not stop investing in preventive solutions. I don't believe in this approach. It's not a choice. You can do both.
It's absolutely important to invest in something that will mitigate the damage. Yes, and all sorts of isolations and business continuity and recovery. It's important, and the backup of the data that mitigates some sort of an impact of potential ransomware that is targeting that data, or ransomware that is encrypting the data. The problem is that eventually we will become in this response mode constantly. And we are already becoming in the response mode constantly because the adversaries, they're inventive. They're very inventive. And if TrickBot or someone else or QuackBot or is in the infrastructure, they may sell it to ransomware to encrypt the data, and you may have recovery controls established against that. But if they know that, they may sell it to another actor. Who to get credentials and maybe steal the data, or maybe do a brand damage, or maybe hit your the downstream of your supply chain, your customers. So there are plenty of ways that they can pivot once they got access. And recovery assumes that they will get access, and it's great because yes, we are all targets and we're all will get folks in our infrastructure, but that is not something that we can afford to stop really, improving our security posture and assessing the attack surface and mitigating that attack surface when the new one appears. Establishing basics like patching that we talked about, of course, to patch those vulnerabilities to minimize the likelihood of being the victim. So I think it's a combination of measures. Absolutely.
I think it's a good question, but I believe there's not a one size fits all solution from both sides, right? I think there's a famous phrase that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right? So I think we need to tackle both sides. So when you start preventing things with education on people side, right? So we are, as I mentioned before, we are living the pandemics in a growing working from home, right? So there's a blur of personal and business risks. So all the things are all together. So I believe that we need to implement a lot of risk mitigation initiatives. Some of them are not that that much expensive because it is inherent to every company. So we need, it is the it is a corporate responsibility. It is not only IT. So in order to educate people on how to use in the right way the endpoint devices and things like that, the best practices on account passwords and etc. So there's not a one size fits all. I think there are both sides of investment. So we need to truly invest on risk mitigation, a myriad of actions and management and governance actions from one side, technology solutions also, and on the other side, for sure, we need to contain the pain once it happens with the right risk segmentation, for example. Right? So uh, that's my opinion. I think we truly need to tackle both sides.
Lots of great questions here. I'm gonna get one from Alexandre, who made two questions already, so I'm gonna get his first one. Also for the three of you, whoever wants to answer. Comparing on-premise and cloud, where are the most attacks running? Eduardo, for you, is it most
Yes.
on-prem or cloud? Yuriy,
Yes,
João, what you seen most?
I can take that. There's a mystical belief that the cloud is 100% safe, right? So people believe that by moving to the cloud, you are safe. It is not, right? Because I personally working on well, in my past consultancy history and career, right before leading the technology here at Voiter, I spent more than 20 years working with large banks and implementing solutions involving cybersecurity. But I can tell you that there are some huge risk assessments involving large uh, public cloud implementations with multiple vulnerabilities. So it depends on truly what is your business model, how you make use of the cloud environment. And I have material evidence that I saw with my eyes in real projects with real clients, right? So and on-prem as well, it is not it is not the synonymous of vulnerabilities. It depends upon how you protect the environment, how you architecting the right blueprint, following the best practices for separating layers and separating segments, not mixing everything in the same chunk, right? So I think there's a lot of good and best practice to apply on both sides. And one answer that I can give to the great question from Alexandre is that there's not a mystical belief that by moving to the cloud, you are completely safe. You are not.
I agree with Eduardo. Stop thinking about, oh, I'm in cloud, so I'm secure. Of course, big companies like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they invest a lot and their infrastructure are very secure. They are not flawless. Nobody, no company are flawless. But their infrastructure, yes, is super secure. But what it matters if they are secure, if you are using outdated software, web applications with a lot of vulnerabilities because you didn't assess vulnerabilities in your system. So they are only protecting their infrastructure. If you put a vulnerable software application in the cloud, it will be vulnerable. It doesn't matter if you are in Amazon, in Google, in Microsoft, because what matters to the attackers is that you open the door. You are in a very safe place, but you open the door to the criminals. So it doesn't matter. I agree with everything Eduardo said.
I wish there was a one-size-fits-all answer here, but there's none. There are risks that are definitely more affecting the on-prem environments. There are risks that are definitely affecting more cloud environments. For example, we all rely on the VPN appliances now. Those are on-prem appliances with outdated firmware, and they're being hit by adversaries. That is an on-prem issue because there are no on-prem patching mechanism for those appliances, and yet we're leaving the S3 buckets with a lot of sensitive data in our cloud environments, or we expose some cloud API app that adversaries can use and get to that data. That is specific to cloud environments. Those attacks are not specific to on-prem but to cloud, and yet there are attacks that don't care whether you're cloud or on-prem. We all experienced and observed this saga of a SolarWinds breach that affected a lot of organizations. It doesn't matter if you're a supplier of a major software that you are deploying, if it's in the cloud environment or on-prem, you'll get a modified malicious update and you'll get infected regardless. It really varies depending on the risks, and all need to be assessed. I would say that the one thing that is really concerning is with the clouds, with moving fully cloud, we put all the eggs in one basket. And we're essentially declaring, I am trusting Amazon or Microsoft or Google or other cloud vendors to take care of my security. I trust them. This is going to be my security model. Well, if I get hacked, then if I get breached, then that will not really be the answer, because this will be my problem regardless. And this is a little bit scary because we need independent controls that we fully control, that can help us get visibility, assess the risk, and take or manage that risk. We cannot afford just trusting specific infrastructure provider to do that for us.
I have other questions here. I'm going to take the one from Pedro first. I think this is mostly for you, Yuriy. So he's telling you, asking about the distribution process, I assume here for a tech solution like the one from Eclypsium. So he's asking about efficient distribution ways like sales partnerships, distributors, trials, POCs, etc. And how do you position among competitors, and how long does it take the sales process? So if you can just tell us a little bit about the sales process of Eclypse in general, I think it will answer his question.
Let me start with answering from the end, how long it takes for the sales process. It takes too long. Always takes too long, especially when you are working and building partnership with larger organizations that have a lot of processes built and traditionally less flexible in deviating from those processes. So it takes months to start engaging and educating on the risk, especially the risk that hasn't registered with those organizations, because maybe it's a new risk, maybe it's a risk to a new environment that they just migrated to, and then it takes maybe a month, maybe two for proof of concept, and then it takes months in procurement, and then it takes months in deployment. It's taking too long, and this is going back to my comments at the beginning of our conversation, is that we cannot afford to move that long, because the adversaries, they move much faster, and we need to be flexible. We need to change the internal processes to start working with and partnering with cybersecurity suppliers and vendors and service and security service providers faster, and more agile. And how can that be done? There are probably plenty of ways, but I would say that one most important part, and especially with smaller companies like Eclypsium, startups, that really is the essence of innovation. If there is a problem that those startups are addressing, then the organizations should probably explore simpler ways, maybe protecting the most important assets, prioritizing those, maybe testing those in a confined environment or in a smaller environment, rather than getting into the mode of it will take me 2 years and I want this in the entire infrastructure in 2 years. 2 years from now, either adversaries will move on, will have moved on to exploiting something else, and it's not going to be relevant, or that startup will cease to exist.
Can you talk, Yuri, about very quickly about your go-to-market or differentiation or competition, just to tackle these points that he asked?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely address an important gap. Our whole goal is to offer visibility into the spaces that our clients typically did not have much visibility. It's important because in order to start understanding the risk and exposure to their infrastructure, their business, they need to have visibility based on it. Start addressing the risk or start assessing the risk. So the visibility into the actual equipments and all of that firmware code inside of them, that's our specialty. And so that is our also very much differentiator from in the industry. We specialize in providing that visibility, in patching the firmware, and discovering firmware vulnerabilities, and discovering firmware compromise and implants and supply chain breaches to those devices. So it is the main kind of a goal of the product and the company.
Thanks, Yuri. So Alexandre asked another great question. He's saying again about JBS just paid $11 million as a ransomware, right, for a cyber attack in Bitcoins. So how can you increase protection about those kinds of attacks, right? How can you protect from ransomware? What can you do in practice? What are you doing, Eduardo, at the bank, and what are you, João, recommending to your clients?
Firstly, this is part of the cybersecurity strategy that we established here. For sure, there's not cybersecurity is not the end; is the journey, right? So there's a continuous evolution of this strategy. And for sure, in order to tackle all those vulnerabilities and global threats that we have, it implies on a blend of the right policies, the right strategies on segmenting the environment, especially in regards of sensitive data management in terms of user access and the gates for the external gates, right? The firewalls, the military zone and not. And for sure it implicates on specific tools that are part of protecting this environment, right? So we do have multiple conversations with multiple service providers and technology solution providers and that's a very complex game. It's an always-on battle, and especially in regards of those global threats, we are following overall the major trends on some specific tools that may prevent such kind of attacks. Right? There are other kinds of risks that we are vulnerable here. Ransomware attacks are becoming for sure something very common chronicle, but it is pretty much focused on large large environments and large opportunities to ransom, right? So I'm watching the news and following the evolution of this criminal attack that is sadly focused on very weak or very how can I say very not usually reinforced companies like hospitals and health systems. We saw some months ago the attack on the Irish health system. So it is very sad to see that it is a global crime, right? So that's why I truly believe that despite of the individual investments that we are doing here, other companies, our colleagues from other banks are doing, we truly miss a coalition and a federated response for this growing sophistication that we are seeing in the market.
I would not say that there is any plug and play solution that address all problems, because the ransomware attacks, the attacker he only needs a small door. It can be a vulnerability in a server, in a device connected to the network. It can be an untrained employee that receives an email, a phishing email, and execute the wrong file, the malicious file. So there is a lot of entry points that the attacker can exploit. Ransomware attacks will become more and more frequent. We are seeing, you are talking 11 million are about the JBS, but we saw the Superior Tribunal de Justiça, Tribunal de Justiça of Rio Grande do Sul. So we are seeing a lot of this. The oil company in US a few weeks ago, this will become more and more frequent and with more and more lethal power. In most ransomware attacks nowadays, the attacker just takes the victim's data as a hostage by encrypting it. But in the future, and we are seeing this starting now, in addition to keeping the data encrypted, we will see threats from attackers also leaking this data publicly. So, okay, you have backup. Oh, I don't care that my data is encrypted because I have a backup. It's bad. Of course, all types of attack are bad. But in a few hours, I can start running my systems again, and I will be good. No, now the attackers, okay, you don't mind that your data are encrypted. Okay, I'm gonna leak this in dark web forums and etc. So it's a second layer of attack, and we have now a third layer of attack that is threatening and extorting your customer, like we saw in the past, like a mental hospital. They leaked a lot of videos of the patient's history of mental disease and so on. And the attackers, they didn't receive a reward, ransom of the hospital. So they start every single patient. Or you pay me, or I can leak your video, I can leak your data. So it's a three-layer attack, holding the data as a hostage, threatening, not only to keep your data locked, but to leak it, potentially harmful data, and ending up starting the end user with the leaked data.
Thank you. Interesting and scary at the same time, honestly.
Yeah.
I have one more question here from the audience. So considering the risk-based approach, Yuriy, and the firmware updates, which firmware updates should be prioritized, or which are the most normally vulnerable or exploited?
Thank you. Coming back to ransomware becomes a incredibly important and a complicated problem. We're now seeing that three attack vectors that are emerging that the ransomware operators are using. They've been traditionally using phishing, then it kind of subsided, then it coming back, and then RDP. Every ransomware actor is exploiting RDP or credentials, and now we're seeing that the VPN is being the kind of emerging attack vector. And from one of our partners, Advanced Intelligence, Vitalik Rimez, we're learning that JBS has been a Citrix VPN, the attack vector for our evil group, right? So this goes into prioritization. All of the devices will have vulnerable firmware, absolutely. In fact, 99% of our devices that we use have this, the vulnerabilities that allow NotPetya-like wipers to, even when we use modern systems with SecureBit and everything else. But the prioritization needs to focus on what is happening right now, actively going on. What are the operations happening in my field or against the organizations similar to me that I may be the next target? And if it's a Citrix VPN with outdated firmware, that's my priority number one. If it's an appliance, network appliance, exposed externally with poor credentials or vulnerabilities in the firmware, that is the top goal. And then next, moving into other critical assets that may not be exposed externally, but nonetheless critical, because the actors, once they get in, they will start propagating laterally and they will start hitting those critical assets. So that goes into how you probably would prioritize updating those systems, and both firmware and software. Doesn't matter whether it's firmware updates or software updates.
I have a question from me, not for the audience. One for Eduardo and then another one for João and Yuriy. So Eduardo, as a bank, right, what is the most impactful or painful or expensive attack you could suffer? What are you most concerned about on the cyber defense of a bank in general?
There are multiple threats, right, for banks, as we process hundreds of millions of dollars every week, right? So especially in a business bank. So everything that touches transactional data and amounts from customers are for sure the top priority risk for banks, because as I told before, the thing that we care most here are our clients, right? So everything that touches directly our clients are the most painful threats for us and for every bank, I think. So the first thing is that. So, and secondly, we do have for sure all the threats on operational things that are inherent to the way we work, the way that we work. They are as important as the threats involving client information or client data, sensitive data, right? So we are watching the news. There are multiple cases of client data leakage or data breaches, stealing sensitive information. So it touches not only cybersecurity but also GDPR, right? So the data privacy rules and regulation as well. So it is very complicated when something like that happens, because there's a cascade of consequences, not only on the cyber security area, but also on data, sensitive data management.
Another question now for João and Yuriy. I'm going to start with João. João, what is the most interesting or crazy or iconic episode that you faced in a client? So what's the most different or crazy cyber thing that you experienced in your career?
It's hard to say, because we help clients from the most varied business segments with the most varied types of attacks. But I can exemplify a sad case. A small company that lends money to other companies was attacked by a ransomware maybe 2 years or 3 years ago. The attack was so severe that it hit all their systems and including backups, as they used a poorly configured solution. Why? They chose the cheapest solution. And they thought, okay, we have a backup. No, the backup is encrypted. And as a result, they no longer knew which companies owed money to them, how much, and when they should pay. They tried to keep it a secret, but of course, someone ended up leaking the information, and the rate of delinquent loans skyrocketed. The company closed its doors a few months later. The company was not super big, but we are talking about a company that had $30 million on loan. So it was a big loss for its owners. They closed the company because of the attack.
Crazy. Yuriy,
And
in your days at...
never recovered the money. This is so sad.
Yeah, it's gone. It's gone. Sad.
Yeah.
Yuriy, in your Intel days, or now at Eclypsium, right? What is the oddest or craziest situation you've seen?
Every situation is very unique, and I've seen it all from compromised digital signage systems to get in the organization to now actually VPN appliances is a major. I think what I probably the most interesting incident that I remember that happened is when TrickBot got shut down or attempted to shut down TrickBot, and a number of our organizations we've been working with, the cleaned up TrickBot, suddenly came back. And what we've observed is that TrickBot actors started pushing out a module to exploit the firmware on the endpoints that TrickBot had infected, and the botnet came back again, and a lot more resilient, and is not being taken down. So that was an eye-opening, because there was a major botnet that has really started being very serious about staying for very long inside their victim infrastructures.
It's like the variants of COVID that we're seeing today, right? Something like that.
We're really
it's going stronger and faster. Yeah.
Yeah, we're really talking about the months or years dwell time without being discovered. It's a very dangerous situation for any company to be, because that those companies can be ransomed multiple times during that period of time by multiple ransomware operators, because that access to the infrastructure of those companies can be sold or provided to multiple rival ransomware gangs.
I have a final question from the audience here from João. I'm going to leave it open to whoever wants to answer. So he asks, how much of an impact do you expect the recent US government executive order and general crackdown on cybersecurity will have on the market?
Time will show. However, I think we are seeing a lot of important steps even now as a result of the executive order, and we're seeing that U.S. government is taking an active role in remediating impact from supply chain attacks and breaches and ransomware attacks. We see that they are trying to take economic advantage from the ransomware folks, and with the $11 million payout and funds recovered. Those are important steps, because in order for us to solve the problems of or not solve, but be more prepared to protect organization better from those actors that hit the supply chain or take an organization for ransom, we need to take economic advantage. They've built a really great economic model. In fact, they've justified the security budgets, and they've justified the security spends, because this is how much you can now those breaches can cost. It's easy to assess the damage of those breaches. So I'm hoping that will be a material improvement.
Yeah, I can complement here. I think it's a good move, but it's taking longer than we expect, as we are watching multiple attacks and sophistication as we discussed here. But it's very complicated because it's very geographically located, right? Because it depends on local government deliberations. So for sure, it is. I'm watching and following the great news there, but it is very complicated still inside US. Imagine rolling out globally, right? So it depends on other countries. For sure, for example, one of the things that they are saying regarding kind of insurance, right, of protecting those attacked companies, it is something that is pretty much complicated to deploy in the same way globally, so in the same timing. So that's the thing that I can mention from my side here in a Brazilian company here, right?
Yeah, I agree with Yuri and Eduardo. We need some time to see the real impact and what other countries will do.
Guys, thanks. We're almost at our time limit, so I just want to open for a quick final consideration from each of you before we wrap. So, João, since you were the last speaking, do you want to do your final thoughts?
I believe that what we saw here is that we need to stop postponing cybersecurity investments. We need to think in security right now. To be honest, thinking in security right now, it's too late because we should thought about this a long time ago. But okay, we still have time, and we need to understand that the threats are becoming more and more complex, more and more problematic. So the time is now. We need to change the reality. In my opinion, like your question is, attackers are winning now, but the war didn't end yet. We can react.
As I think, would like to reinforce the thing that I think cybersecurity is a journey. It's not the end, right? It is an always-on battle. The things are gonna sophisticate even more in the upcoming years, and I truly expect the more collaboration and the level of professionalism that the criminals have on the dark side, on the light side of companies, governments, and tech solution providers to collaborate more each other for stronger responses for against such threats. Right? So that's my final comment.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, and I think it's important to not be complacent, because complacency with where we are does not really is not where we want to be, given the speed of changes that are happening from the criminal actors and adversaries. The status quo is not where we want to be now, because the pace of innovation on the attacker side is increasing, and we need to increase the pace of innovation side, adopt new solutions, adopt them faster, try them out faster, see their value faster. If they don't provide you visibility, try other solutions. You need to get solutions that provide you the new things that you have not seen in your infrastructure, that is new, that would, is a blind spot that you now can see as a result of those. So we need to innovate faster, and we need to be more agile and flexible on the defender side.
Guys, with that, I want to wrap it up. We are on the top of the hour. Thank you so much. Thanks, Yuriy, João, Eduardo, for your great participation here and your presence. Thank you for all of the attendees that joined, that asked questions, interacted here. It was really, really great. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to another webinar from Mindset Ventures very soon.